And if you just connect those dots without a grant, without a middleman, without a contract, we were beginning to feed ourselves. That's when I named it the Black Church Food Security Network. And whoever can feed themselves can free themselves.
Okay, friends, Happy New Year, and we're back. Yes, some of you are out there today making and breaking resolutions. We're breaking resolutions like we're breaking hearts, people, already, because sometimes I wonder if we're striving for the wrong things or thinking about it the wrong way. Welcome to the ecoChristian podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Cray Haynes, and we're exploring what it means to be Christian on this planet Earth. And I think sometimes when we think about resolutions, we tend to make the mistake of thinking about like perfection, right? Like, I'm going to perfect me this year, or this aspect of my life this year, and just this whole modern idea that we've created when we think of perfection. And I'm tempted to go down a whole holiness theology side trail here about misconceptions around perfection, but not today. I won't be lured. But yeah, sometimes I think we just are striving for that sort of controlled, perfect environment. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, an example that comes to mind, I remember when, do people still do senior pictures? I don't know if that's still a thing. I think that's still a thing. But back in high school, my mom, we went to Olin and Mills, is that right? It was like a professional photography place, right? With actual legit cameras. I'm pretty sure this is still a thing, even though we all carry high resolution cameras in our pockets now. But so my mom scheduled my quote unquote senior pictures to be taken, and but y'all, I'm like a 18-year-old, 17-year-old high school dude with acne and braces and stuff, and so I kid you not, friends. My mom took me to the orthodontist to temporarily have my braces removed, okay, for these senior pictures. As in, I had to endure the agony of getting braces twice just for these photographs, all right? But then, afterward, we get the photographs back, we get the proofs, and, I'm I've got, acne on my face or my lips or something. And so she has the photographer, the editor person to, digitally edit my lips. And so if you look at these photos, I have this just weird kind of flat lip situation. I'm I don't even look like that. But anyway, y'all, love my mom, but it was just this is just too much. This is we want to control it, but life isn't like that, is it? Actually last night we were just watching it's like a Winnie the Pooh Christmas special, because if you're going to watch a Christmas special. And anyway, long story short, all the characters realized they were driving Rabbit crazy. And so they decided they were all going to make resolutions to, quote unquote, change themselves for Rabbit so Rabbit wouldn't leave. And so Winnie the Pooh was like, I'm not going to eat any more honey ever. And Piglet was like, I'm not going to be afraid of anything. And Eeyore said he wasn't going to be gloomy. And then Tigger said he's not going to bounce anymore. And all of a sudden you're just right. And this is sort of the whole premise that it's just so entertaining. I'm going to alter my very being into something that doesn't resemble anything natural. Anyway, so I guess what I love about the natural world as God created it to be, and again, anytime I say the natural world, you can just imagine the air quotes that are happening up here, because the whole thing is to not make this a binary, right? To say that that we are included in the natural world, that everything is within the natural world as God created it. But it's inherently kind of a mess, right? At least to our modern perfectionistic eyes. Of course, many of us have spent countless hours attempting to force landscapes into straight lines and hedges into squares, but nature naturally wants to overlap, to crawl around, to understory, to create webs. I remember a wise old farmer said to me once that nature doesn't naturally compete, but it desires to collaborate. You know, there's this beauty amidst the diversity of the natural world and the variety and interplay of the jungle floor, right? Not only is it beautiful, but that kind of interconnection is healthy. It's what's giving life. It's a picture of life sharing life. And when we attempt to disconnect and, quote, order and systematize God's creation, we realize it just doesn't work like that. Because the closer we look at something, the deeper we see there's just more. Atoms, minerals, matter, right? In fact, did you know that around 96% of your body is made up of carbon and oxygen and hydrogen and nitrogen? And those four things also make up the vast majority of the entire natural world. And so I wonder, how might whatever your resolution be this year, that it takes a page out of creation's book? That there be less striving for perfection and more process, less competition and more collaboration, less homogeneous and more complexity, more diversity, that you find health not in mastery over something, but in connection with many things. So with that, I'm pumped for this episode. I'm talking with Reverend Dr. Heber Brown of the Black Church Food Security Network, and it's so good. And again, no matter your context, your color, whatever the situation your life is in, Heber's ministry has something for us all to learn from. And so I'm excited to share this conversation with all of you. All right. Well, today, friends, I've got Reverend Dr. Heber Brown with me. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Caleb. Thanks for having me today.
That's what's up. So good. And you're in Baltimore, right?
Correct, I am.
Yeah, yeah. What's it like there right now?
Cold. Born and raised here in Baltimore, so this is home, and
Okay.
there's a number of exciting things on the near horizon with a lot of organizations that are just energized, strangely enough, just energized
Yeah.
by the opportunities we have to lean into deeper collaboration and partnership to address various issues,
Yeah.
personal, political, social, and otherwise. And so a lot of good energy right now.
All the things. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
So, friends, Dr. Heber Brown has been a pastor for many years and is also the founder and director of the Black Church Food Security Network. Do you guys abbreviate that, or are you just kind of?
BCFSN for short, but no,
Yeah,
that's
the
it.
short is a little long. Yeah, I love
The
it
short is
though.
not.
It's so good. Because you got to say it.
Yes.
Yeah, right on. And Heber, is that a family name?
I'm Heber the Third. Yes, sir.
That's right. You're Heber the Third. Very
Our
cool.
patriarch of our family was Bishop Heber Brown the First.
Okay.
And we are still very much so shaped by the way that he and my grandmother, Beatrice Brown, set their 8 children on the path of growing up in church and having that PK experience and serving the church, serving the Lord, serving people. And though both of them have passed, that influence still guides and shapes who we are to this very day.
Oh man, I think that's so important to know your roots like that
Mhm.
and to get that generational perspective on it all.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love would you mind kind of just giving us a bit about your background and your roots and your story and how you got
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, absolutely. No problem at all. As I said, I'm born here in Baltimore. I'm the oldest of five, and third generation Baptist preacher. And we have many, many pastors and church leaders on both sides of my family, and also educators and musicians. So we are grateful to have just a lot of really cool, impactful, and powerful people
Mm,
in our family. And of course, they helped to shape how I came to know myself and understood, the unique fingerprint of God on my life. As my dad likes to talk about, that unique fingerprint of God on your life. There's something distinct, something special, something that you are uniquely positioned to offer and radiate into this world. And so their care and cultivation helped me to find that unique thing for me. And for me, it's found near the intersection of my faith and my understanding of justice, or what some others might call the social gospel. And so
mhm,
when I'm reading scripture, I'm reading biblical scripture, for instance, and trying to listen for the marginalized voice and looking for those who are on the edge of the story, those who are not permitted a voice at all in the pericope, and
mhm,
also analyzing the power dynamics at play in our sacred scriptures. And all of that also then helps me to better exegete society and helps to inform my understanding of the world as well. And so, despite me, with all that said, despite me growing up saying, I want to be a preacher just like my daddy, that's when I was a little boy. When I went to college at Morgan State University, my tone changed. And I said, I want to do something else. I want to make my own way. And by the time I got to my final year at Morgan State, uh, God said, Heber, stop playing, get to seminary. We got work to do. And so I
mm,
graduated from Morgan State with my psychology degree, went to seminary at Virginia Union University in Richmond, and then ultimately Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C., where I got a Doctor of Ministry degree in church leadership. Uh, I started pastoring at 28 years old. I was called to the Pleasant Hope Baptist Church here in Baltimore. I served there for 14 years. It was another classroom. As much as I grew up in church and had all the degrees, it's nothing like being a part of congregational life and
mm.
having to learn on the job so much that the books never spoke to. So
That's
I
right.
I grew there, and my experience there helped to put me on the course of what I'm doing today. So I'm grateful.
Man, that's so good. That's so well said. I mean, there's so much you just are not going to learn at seminary and at university. And and I'm always like, when are they going to have that class where you just you get to talk about everything from taxes to
Yes.
all the the funerals and the and yeah, 100%. Sounds like that it's been quite a trail for you into this space as well. And you're still pastoring right now?
Actually, no, no, no. The work of the Black Church Food Security Network grew so big that I had to step down and step away.
Okay.
And for a number of years, I was doing both, and then it just grew. And
Yeah.
so about 2.5 years ago, I stepped down, and I've been full time with the Black Church Food Security Network ever since.
Yeah, which I'm sure is its own sort of pastorate.
It really is. Caleb,
Y-
I thought the preaching would slow down. I thought the speaking and the congregational stuff would slow down. It actually went up. So I go from leading one church to now providing pastoral support to 233 churches across the nation. So it's a
Wow.
whole other level of ministry that feels just like pastoring, but just on a different scale now.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like once you have accepted that call to pastor in your life, everything you do just is like part of that call, and you're just like it doesn't go away. It just
Doesn't go away.
yeah, yeah. That's so cool. So, yeah, obviously we want to talk about the Black Church Food Security Network and food and faith, and that's a big part of what we're talking about. But I'm wondering if Reverend Heber Brown has a favorite kind of food that that's like your jam. I know we're kind of around the holidays right now while we're recording, so
Yeah.
do you have some holiday food that's like this is what I'm here for?
Well, I'm vegetarian. Through the course of this um, ministry and this
Okay.
call to the Black
Mhm.
Church Food Security Network, I underwent my own transformation with respect to diet that has done wonders for my own health. And so it's not just an organization, it's a personal thing too.
Mm,
Uh, but there are certain things that this vegetarian still needs to get around this time of year. One of them is the sweet potato pie. I need to get my pie. I need to get my macaroni and cheese with a little bit of a crunch on the edge of that
yes.
macaroni and cheese. My stuffing, like all this. Just think about all your favorite sides, and that's my jam pretty much. I'll stay right over there. Black beans and hummus also was just two of my best friends, and
Ooh,
so
you put those
black
together?
no black bean burgers or black bean
Oh, I
something,
see what you did there. Okay. Yeah.
hummus wrap. So yeah,
Yes.
Mediterranean and Indian dishes also are very high on my list of favorite cuisines too.
Man, you're speaking my language right now. Yeah. In Nashville, so I'm in Nashville, and
Yeah,
we're just like there's so many kind of the old school meat and threes everywhere.
yeah.
And but we always go in and we just like, can we get like the side plate? I just want the just give me some of that. And yeah,
Yes.
it's so good, so good. So I'm curious because I feel like that that sort of diet is probably pretty countercultural in your quote
Mm.
unquote ministry context in Baltimore. Is that a conversation that you end up having a lot?
Well, it used to be more than it is now, and I think there have been a number of shifts socially where a number of us are just more sensitive to what it is that we're eating, and we're more health conscious, and we're more asking questions like, where did this food come from? How far did it travel? The local eating focus is definitely more than what it used to be. And so I'm not finding it is as much. But even with that said, I still try to eat a little bit before I go to fellowships because I'm like, most times whoever was in the kitchen was not thinking there's vegetarians coming to this. And so I have been in settings, unfortunately, where, it's like, hey, just eat the salads or just eat the grass or something like that. I'm like, hey, I'm hungry. I don't just want salads.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I've learned I got to nibble a little bit on what I have at home or bring it with me, uh,
Hmm.
for the sake of being a part of some of these fellowships. But I'm grateful to see the shifts. There are some people, Caleb, who are very zealous when it comes to veganism or vegetarianism. That's not me.
Mm,
I just recognize for me that this shift in my diet helped me get my blood pressure under control.
mm.
It helped my primary care doctor say to me, Heber, whatever you are doing, keep doing that. It's going to keep your pressure. And it's been true. I just did my annual physical last week. My pressure was perfect. My body is responding wonderfully to this diet. So what I tell people is listen to your body. What is your body telling you? Learn how to listen to what your body is saying. And wherever that lands with respect to what the favorite cuisine or diet
Mm.
is probably going to align well and you'll be all right.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And, I don't think we should be too surprised to find that this kind of diet and this approach to diet is good for creation, you know.
Absolutely.
And so should we be surprised at all to find that God's design is another level down
Yes.
for that.
Yeah, yeah. Who would have thunk it? Just following along with what's there. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, I love that, and I love to hear, because you're embodying this work literally in your body already, and I think that speaks so much to it. And so, yeah, I wonder, would you just share? Maybe let's just start at the beginning of the Black Church Food Security Network. Tell us maybe a bit about the mission and how it began, and what some of the factors were that first helped you kind of recognize, or maybe that turned the light bulbs on for you.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things I noticed when I was pastoring, and I started pastoring at 28 years old, like I said, and so it was an education in the classroom. And one of the things that I learned was that most of my time and my energy Monday through Saturday was spent extending pastoral care to those who were hospitalized or who were bedridden at home. And I did what seminary taught me to do: give a scripture, give a prayer, don't stay too long, move to the next person. But Caleb, eventually I got tired, man, of
Mm.
just doing the scripture prayer and hoping that everything worked out all right and trusting God. And for that, I felt like there was something that I needed and could add to it, to address what I was seeing. And so as I listened to people who were hospitalized or homebound, I began to pick up a pattern in their conversations that pointed me in the direction of noticing that diet was related to their dilemma, that
Mm.
that their palate was a part of the problem of what had them hospitalized. And then I started to see this happening over and over and over again in terms of the same families, the same
Mm.
people. And so eventually, you know, I started to think, wonder what I could do. And the first thought was to partner with the local market that was down the street
Mm.
to see if we could pipeline produce from their market to our church. It's right over the main intersection, within walking distance. But the price of their produce and the cultural disconnects of that environment
Mm.
dissuaded me from leading my church into that kind of partnership. The produce was too high, and this market was not designed with me or my community in mind. And it was very clear there was some
Mm.
glaring things there. And so those red flags waving at the front door
Mm.
let me know that that would not be the avenue. And one day leaving from the market and walking back to the church, I passed a piece of our front yard that I had walked past thousands of times before. But on that day, with divine discontent bubbling up inside of me, God gave a vision. And the vision simply was, if you can't afford what they have across the street, roll up your sleeves and grow it yourself.
Mm.
And that's essentially what I went inside the church saying: hey, y'all, let's start a garden. Long story short, a remnant of the congregation got behind the idea. We
Mm.
transformed that lot into a 1,500 square foot garden. We started growing 1,200 pounds of produce every season. And I watched that food from the church garden go to the church kitchen, from the church kitchen into congregational meals, and also from the garden to the homes of the members and neighbors of our church.
Mm.
Now, our church, Caleb, it was 125 members or so, and not a mega building at all. It was an average sized church by all accounts in this country. But that little garden transformed our ministry. We became a destination church. And I know we reached that level when people started flying in from out of town to come worship with us and see the garden.
Wow.
Imagine what it feels like when you got 125 folks in the church. It's a regular Black Baptist church in Baltimore, and people are buying plane tickets and hotel rooms to come and check out what's happening here.
Mm.
I knew we were on to something. And in 2015, in the midst of the what we call here the Baltimore uprising, and some of your listeners may remember, there was a young man named Freddie Gray who was killed at the hands of Baltimore City police, and the
Mm.
city went up in demonstrations and protests and rallies, and our church started getting a particular kind of phone call from people in the city. We started getting calls from people who lived in or near the epicenter of where the marching and demonstrations were happening. And they were calling and saying, Reverend Brown, I need food. Can you help get me some food?
Mm.
Because the corner stores in their neighborhood were closed. Public transportation was not going through their neighborhood. and even public schools closed down for a few days. And then there was a curfew on these neighborhoods as well. So these communities already were victims of food apartheid, and we do choose that language intentionally over food desert because we recognize the intentionality that went into designing a neighborhood that did not have easy access to grocery stores or fresh food. The decisions on how these communities would be constructed actually were decided in the 1930s. And a thing called redlining comes out as a result. And that red line predicted in the 30s where the most impoverished communities would be, the communities that did not have the greater job opportunities, the communities without high quality education. All of the ripple effects of those policy decisions in the 1930s are still being felt to this very day. And so with the nod to the intentionality of the design and the zoning and the business and social economic characteristics, we don't say desert, we say food apartheid. We recognize that a desert is a naturally occurring part of what God created in this earthly ecosystem. And while people think there's no life in the desert, for those who have eyes to see, there's a whole lot of life in the desert. And so we problematize the language of food desert on purpose. We make people think about that because we want people to recognize that these communities that don't have access or agency with their food environment did not just happen by accident. Specific zoning, specific legislation, specific business decisions created and brewed a perfect storm for the problems we see in the neighborhoods that struggle the most. And so these food apartheid zones were already a problem before the uprising. In the midst of the uprising, the problem tightened and intensified. So they called our church for food. We harvested from our garden, but we also called our farmer friends. And we were able to load produce from farms and from our garden, process it into in our multi-purpose room, load it on our church van, and I drove the church van around getting food to neighborhoods around the city of Baltimore at that time. That's when we knew we were on to something. 3 weeks of doing that, I said, we got a system. We got farmers, we got communities, and we got church. And if you just connect those dots without a grant, without a middleman, without a contract, we were beginning to feed ourselves. That's when I named it the Black Church Food Security Network. And we just grew it more and more. And pastors and churches started calling us saying, can you help us do the same thing? And so I'll shut down by saying today we have a number of programs. One is called Operation Higher Ground, where we help churches to start gardens on their land. And we focus on church-owned land because in the African-American community, eminent domain, gentrification, all of that is very real. And so we wanted to grow food on land where we felt like there was greater buffers of protection against development snatching the land away. So we do gardens on church land. We host farmers markets at churches. We like to do it on Sunday because we know that after service on Sunday, everybody's going to eat somewhere. Why not put farmers' food in their face and give members a chance to shake the hands of farmers in their neighborhood? And then we have the ARC program where we focus on institutional level purchasing. We know one of the highest line items in the church budget is food. And so how about we encourage churches to buy in bulk or wholesale or through a CSA program from the farmers of their community and not just at big box stores in the neighborhood. So that's the short of our programming. But what started out as one church, as I said earlier, the church I pastored is now 233 churches and rising. And we've now a national organization and growing a staff to help manage all the things. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot to tell you, Caleb. We also had a citrus farm in Jacksonville, Florida. One of our member churches down there had land. And I had the idea and I said, listen, if Dole and Tropicana can grow fruit and citrus, why can't we? And so we started a citrus fruit farm at one of our churches in Florida. And then we started a blueberry farm last year with one of our Black farmers in Virginia. And so we're really excited about not just gardens, but the ways that we're also leaning into the farming space too.
Mm.
Again, connecting the faith community and the farm community in deeper ways.
Mm. Man, everything right there, bro. Everything. And yeah, I've got so many questions. I don't know where to start. Yeah, I really love that because, food is at that real bottom level of being able to unmask all the different systematic layers of injustice and oppression within a society, within a culture, and within a place. And it's amazing, because so much of it just really starts right there, and that's why I think this work is so beautiful and so important. And it makes me curious too about what some of the having done this for a minute now, what's some of the changes that you've seen in that regard as communities are kind of doing that uncovering and doing that work and returning to the soil and finding a little bit of food sovereignty and an understanding around the systems that have created all of this, right? And what some of those, have you seen maybe even in your community or the one around, your church that you were a part of there, where it kind of began, how that community has began to actually physically change? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that comes quickest to mind is, Caleb, when I first stood up and said, God gave me a vision that we start a garden on the land that we own. I don't know what I was thinking when I said that. I thought that there would be like unanimous, like, yes, let us start building. But I can't tell you how many eyes rolled. So here you go again with another. He's saying he got a vision from God. I was like, no, for real this time, y'all. Maybe last time I was just, whatever, but this time. So, it was some resistance to the idea of using church lawns in that way
Mm,
15 years ago. Now, not so much.
mm,
In fact, I just learned of a book called Gone for Good: Negotiating the Coming Wave of Church Property Transition by Mark Elsden. And the research and the information he puts in his book and in so many other places as well is very real and very present for a lot of churches and church leaders in particular, that we have to find alternative purposes for the assets that we own. And what our organization helps to do is to help churches dream bigger dreams about the land that they have, that perhaps it can be used for something more than just looking pretty on the outside. But how about we use it to do the work of ministry in the neighborhood? And so
mm,
that is definitely a change that I've seen over the years. I've
mm,
also seen more of a change when it comes to there's a growing sense amongst churches that charity is not enough.
mm.
After years of just giving food to the hungry, they're seeing the same people in the same families over and over again.
Right.
And what I've noticed is there's a greater appetite now amongst churches and church leaders to swim upstream to more of the root causes as to why people are hungry in the first place. And while food is all over our organization, what I often say to people is, hey, y'all, we are not a food charity group. So when you partner with us, work with us, we're not a food charity organization. Our work is not focused on feeding the needy. Our work is focused on organizing the hungry. And that leads to my thought here that charity alone takes a toll. It's expensive. Even if the food is free, the price is high.
Mm,
It corrodes that sense of dignity. It wears away at the sense of somebodyness, particularly for people who for generations have been pushed to the margins anyway. And then it also is a siren song that calls some people into a false sense of superiority. And so when you feel like you're superior, and that's the constant posture that you're in, that also is corrosive to your soul.
mm,
Because if you're always giving, what are you receiving? If you're always giving, how are you seeing value in others?
mm,
And so I've seen a shift even in that realm that more and more churches are asking different kinds of questions. It's almost like, why are we doing the same thing over and over again? It's seeing the same results and not even creating the space
Right.
to imagine a different way to do ministry that just might say, let's put charity and justice together, walking like a left foot and a right foot to address the issue of hunger and malnutrition.
Mm, absolutely. Absolutely. That's really good. I like what you said, from not a charity, but you say organizing the hungry.
Yeah, not feeding the needy, organizing the hungry, because if you organize the hungry, they can feed themselves. So we don't want to lull people into postures of subservience to systems that have not proven the ability to make sure everyone is fed. I mean, think about some of the most popular Bible stories that preachers preach about and Sunday school teachers teach about are food related miracles where everybody is fed. Like, we got to ask, why is that such a popular spiritual and biblical story? What does that elicit in us that makes us preach it over and over again?
Mm,
Whether you're talking about Acts chapter 2 and the day of Pentecost, or if you're talking about Jesus and the 5,000, there's something that ignites inside of us where we get excited about everybody having what they need. That's the miracle. And so what we wanted to do as an organization is not fall into the posture of a nonprofit food charity organization that only is concerned about getting meals out the door.
right.
We want to swim up and say, wait a minute, these families, their destiny should not be wrapped up in coming to our lines every week. God wants something higher for them and for us. And we want to partner with God to help usher in a different understanding of how we approach this crucial issue to the quality of life for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's great. And like you said, there's so many organizations who are already doing that charity work, and I think sometimes I think you name that sort of desire really well because I think most of the churches that I've talked to and connected with, right, they want that too, right? They want there's something more. We've realized that this sort of like charity only model it kind of shrivels up and dries out at some point, and you need both and I think the church is obviously really well poised to be those community hubs where we create that resilience and that we do that work of digging digging in the dirt together. And so that's it right there. I wonder I wonder what some of the barriers are, that you've encountered in this work in a community, and but also I'm thinking about the historical colonial barriers, and that not too long ago, right? What does it mean that people who were black and brown communities, had this oppressed relationship with the land? Is that something that you've kind of had to readdress in this work as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest ones. And what I have learned is that oftentimes it can be addressed with a reframing of either the lived experience, when I'm talking about older African Americans who remember sharecropping or remember their
Mm,
parents or grandparents' experience of sharecropping,
mm,
um, or in, kind of the generational trauma response of stay away from that. That is where the pain was in regard to chattel slavery of Black people in this country. So here's the reframing. What I found to be effective is, number one, recognizing that that's in the room. Let's just name it. I think that's important for a lot of issues, but it's been important to us and me and my work to just name that that is an impulse and a response that's going to be present when I'm talking about, y'all, let's go grow food and let's use church land to grow food. So one, you got to name it. But the
mm.
reframing happens when you peel back the layers of either the personal memories or the generational memories related to it, right? So it's like, what really is shaping your response when it comes to farming, land, and agriculture? And as we peel it back and create safe space for people to really tap into how they're feeling, my undergrad degree is in psychology. I wanted to be a child psychologist coming out of undergrad. So it almost feels like therapy in a way to say, you got to create safe space to lean in here. And what I help point people to is the fact that it was never the land itself that was the oppressor or that was the one causing harm. It wasn't the land. It wasn't the crops. It wasn't the trees. But when you associate the traumatic experience and you put it in the soil, then of course you don't want to go anywhere near that.
Mm.
When the real problem was slavery, and then after chattel slavery, the system of oppression that had economic violence, physical violence, and so much more under Jim Crow and sharecropping and the like. That let's put the blame where it belongs. These systems, these configurations of society, this legacy of chattel slavery, that is the problem. That is what we got to look at, not only for what it was back then, but the ways in which that kind of oppression and those configurations of subservience and domination still show up today. It was not the soil. In fact, if you really look at the history, it was the soil and the land and nature that helped to free my ancestors from slavery. So when I think about Harriet Tubman, for instance, Harriet Tubman and many others who were involved in supporting the Underground Railroad and breaking the law of the land just to be free. I mean, I want to be very clear that they were breaking the law to be free, to follow the law of the Lord in terms of who the son sets free is free indeed. But Harriet Tubman had to learn how to read the stars. Harriet Tubman had to learn how to read moss on a tree so that the moss could point the direction of where you need to go. My ancestors who were fleeing chattel slavery and running from dogs who were trying to drag them back to the plantation, they learned how to get in water to confound the sensory abilities of the bloodhounds. And so from water to moss to stars to trees, and I'm not even talking about my ancestors who created maroon communities, like in the Great Dismal Swamp around Virginia and North Carolina or other places, where they had to learn how to create a life for themselves in community, oftentimes in places where slave catchers did not want to go. That might be in a swamp. It might be in a cave. It might be in a mountain, like in Jamaica. It might be somewhere where people don't think life can thrive. We have histories now that there were formerly enslaved Africans who created community in less than desirable places in order to create buffer against slavery and to remain free. So that gets down into the details and footnotes of the story in much more than what the knee-jerk reactions to, oh man, no, you're trying to get me out there like a Hebrew slave. That's the kind of thing that I will hear. It's like, no. You need to recognize that the closer we are to land and food, the closer we are to freedom, because whoever feeds you controls you, and whoever can feed themselves can free themselves. And so there's a larger narrative here, and there's a reframing that is possible. And then on the biblical side and spiritual side, I also make room to say, wait a minute. If land itself was the problem, if growing food itself was the issue, why does the very Bible you carry begin with a story of God creating a garden and then somebody to tend the garden? Before there was a bishop, a pastor, a deacon, a trustee, a prophet, or a missionary, the first role of human endeavor around labor was a farmer, was a gardener. And many of our stories throughout the biblical text also point to farming, gardening, taking care of animals, some kind of land based. And it makes sense because the Bible comes out of an agrarian society. But I'm simply saying, putting the spotlight on that helps some people to say, yeah, wait a minute, maybe my feelings about growing food have been misplaced because I was placing the trauma in the soil and not on
Mm,
the system that promoted the slavery and oppression of my people.
yeah. That's so good. And it really frames that, I feel like, correctly, and that this is a reconciliation work between,
Yes,
not just one another, but us and creation and the
yes,
soil. And once you get into that and you realize even how much our soil is carrying the weight of slavery
yes.
and oppression today,
Whew.
through, industrial agro, systems. You're
Yes,
like, wow, this is, and then who's eating that? You know what I'm
yes,
saying?
yes.
And how that's all connected. Yeah. Have you guys had to, this is sort of a random side question. Have you guys had to like get into zoning issues and that sort of thing with gardens? So
Mm,
when you talk about 233 partner churches, getting a little more practical here,
yeah.
are these churches who are actively pursuing some version of growing their own food, or are these churches who are kind of engaging in peripheral ways?
That's good. So that's a great question. So these congregations, we make room for them to become a part of the network in a way that makes sense for their context and the vision that God has given that church.
Hmm.
So for some churches, that is a garden. For other churches, their main point of contact with our programming is a market, the Soil to Sanctuary market. For others, it's partnering with the farmer around a CSA program, a community supported agriculture program. So we don't dictate to a church, it has to be all the things. Just because as a pastor, I know that everything don't fit. So it's like, okay, what if this is resonant for you and your church? What makes the most sense based off the gifts that God has placed in your congregation? And then all the other factors that go into making a decision about how they get involved. So some churches do gardens, and the gardens that we will do, again, because it's on church land, we've been able to sidestep zoning issues. No church is growing food at such a scale that it triggers or crosses threshold of like certain types of, you know, licenses and regulations you got to be sensitive to. Much of it in Maryland, they call them cottage laws. Much of what's happening in our church gardens fall underneath the umbrella of cottage laws, meaning is basically one step removed from growing in your own kitchen and putting it in a mason jar. So we've not bumped into any of that, gratefully and thankfully. Um, so we're all clear there. But yeah, all of the churches are not growing. Some of the churches are partnering with the farmers that do grow or hosting markets for the farmers to come and check them out.
Okay, yeah, that does clear it up, and that's yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing food, that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of, and look,
It's
Caleb,
so much work.
sometimes I have to convince churches that they're not in a position to grow. As much as their eyes are big and they're excited about starting a garden, I say to them, listen, y'all not ready for this. You're not ready to be outside every week. You're not ready to be out here in July when it's 95 degrees. You're not ready to be lugging stuff. And if the average age of your church is 75, 80 years old, y'all definitely are not going to be out here doing this work. So sometimes I have to redirect churches to something that won't just give them a strong start, but something that they can sustain. And sometimes that means guiding them as much as they want to grow tomatoes. I'll say, listen, unless you're ready to have people out here every week harvesting these tomatoes, you don't want to grow tomatoes. You want to grow something that's a little slower, maybe, or maybe
Mm,
you just want to grow just in the fall when it's cooler and not in the summer. Or maybe you just want to do a spring thing. So there's a whole lot of consulting that I have to do with churches to help them to see what makes the most sense.
absolutely. And again, the important thing is re-entering that relationship and
That's right.
finding that individual way in.
That's right.
And so that's really great. And what's more important than just the way that we eat and how we eat?
That's
And that's the best way we can participate is just by the foods that we're putting in our bodies, and that we're the kind of agriculture, like you say, the CSAs that we can be a part of. And so that's what's up. Yeah, I wonder if you'd paint us a picture, briefly. I know
yeah.
we're coming, to our time here, but of more of the markets as well.
Yeah.
And you talked earlier about some of the cultural disconnect.
Yes.
And I can imagine that's really real, and I'm, let's be honest, I'm a white dude who wears flannel, and I should be able to, I like walk in Whole Food, but when I walk in someplace even like Whole Foods, I'm like, I am way not bougie enough for this situation, like, I don't wear yoga pants, so. And I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say I know what your culture context is, but so
Yeah.
I wonder if you'd paint us a picture a little bit here
Yeah.
and say, well, this is what our market looks like, and this is kind of, where we've found, the ability to kind of grow roots.
Yeah. So, I mean, for your listeners, for many of them who've been to farmers markets, you already get a running start in terms of what our markets look like. Of course, central to it is farmers at stalls with produce and value added items that they have to share. Um, the sauce that we kind of drip on top of that is we'll have a DJ in the corner playing the classics and some of the latest music. Line dancing is going on, so we're doing the wobble and the Cupid shuffle all of them down the aisles. There might be a grill where one of the deacons is grilling burgers. We got dessert stalls where people are, selling their desserts. There's information tables with a wide range of resources available to folks. So we want it to feel like a combination of like your family reunions, cookout, you're visiting your favorite cousin, you're in the backyard at the house, holiday weekend. It's a combo of all of that. So it's not just vegetables. And in fact, we made the mistake in the beginning of just doing vegetables. And when we're just doing vegetables, people would say, "Oh yeah, this is nice, Rev, but it's missing a thing or two."
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
started to be more realistic. Just because I'm a vegetarian does not mean I don't like sweet potato pie. Let's get some pies on this table, and I like to dance. Let's get some music in the air. Make it a fun event, not just a food event. And what we found is that it invites a much larger swath of people when you have all those ingredients. And it's a really delicious gumbo of an experience where music, fun, children's area, artists, entertainers, information, and the farmers there too. It's a really good time.
that sounds really culturally rich, and as it should be, and I think that's the work of the church to do have that vision and that imagination to lower the paywall for what it looks like to engage our community in this stuff, and it's obviously not, and you already said it, right? It's not about just inviting people in or being a charity. It's the potluck theology.
Yes. Yes. Potluck theology. Absolutely. I like that. Yes.
Yeah. That's what's up, man. Well, man, I'm so thankful to hear about this, and we're gonna link in the show notes the ways that churches can engage with the Black Church Food Security Network and connect with you guys. And is there any last thing that maybe we didn't get to, or maybe something that you'd like to throw out here at the end, or a word of encouragement?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just say that my context here in Baltimore and throughout our network is really locked in and zoned in on the African American community very intentionally because we see when it comes to health, there are great disparities when it comes to health and food in our community. And on the farmer side, yes, we focus on Black farmers too, because for the past 100 years, they faced different levels of discrimination when it comes to their livelihood and their farm. That said, I want your listeners to be very attuned to the fact that our attentiveness to our context is a part of what makes this thing go.
Mm.
And I would just offer up that while your context may be different, the discipline, the practice, and the posture of doing deep listening and paying attention to your context can produce very similar results. And so there's a lot of transferable wisdom, even if your context is different, there's some racial distinctions. The thing that I really would hope that people get here is one, that paying attention to what's happening right under your nose with the people you share life with is a powerful first step. And then two, religious institutions of all stripes have too much stuff in our hands to only be utilizing it on the day that we worship together. How are we unleashing what God has blessed us with to be a blessing. So it's one thing to ask for blessings. It's another level to say, God, bless me to be a blessing. And I just want to give faith communities in particular, and faith leaders and lay members, permission to dream bigger dreams regarding what's possible. If not now, I don't know when. It's perfect time for it.
Man. You the man, Heber Brown the third. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Cool. So, lastly, so I'm here in Tennessee. Can black churches in Tennessee connect with you guys? Is there a...
Yes, absolutely. I just got back from Knoxville a couple of months ago with Reverend Chris Battle and Battlefield Farms, and I think we have some Nashville. So yes, please go to our website, blackchurchpower.com. Cool. Even if you're not a part of African American congregation, but you see the value of supporting people who are closest to the problem of food insecurity in their neighborhood, being in the driver's seat of creating solution, check out the website too and see if there's ways to support financially or otherwise. We'd love to partner together.
So good. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Caleb.
I just love this conversation so much, friends, and I'm so glad to be on this journey together with you. Again, just remember to hit that subscribe button, share this with your neighbor, and help us to keep this conversation going. Grace and peace, friends.